Hello, Spring and Kafka fans. My name is Fatih Dirlikli. I'm a software engineer with 15 years of experience, and the last 10 years of it is specialized on Java and Spring technologies. This is the first video of a series that we will explore Kafka with Spring and Spring Boot. In this video, we are going to be laying down the basics. We are going to boot up a single node Kafka on Docker and write a simple Spring Boot application with Kafka producers and consumers, which writes to and reads from a Kafka topic. The upcoming videos of the series are going to build on top of this application. That said, let's not lose any time and get going. If you don't already have it, we can start with actually installing Kafka on to Docker. I mean, you know, Docker is pretty handy if you want to do quick setups at your local computer. It makes things much more faster for you. It simplifies trying new things, and I'm going to take advantage of my Docker for desktop for installing Kafka locally. And I'm logged into my Docker Hub account, and I'm going to be using Confluent Kafka image in this video. So if you go to hub.docker.com and then log in into your account, in this case, I'm logged in as ftierlikli, and search for Confluent Kafka and click on the image that you see that is listed when you search for Confluent Kafka, as you see over here. This basically tells you the simple steps to get going and start running Kafka on your local Docker. The first thing to do, I'm not going to go into too much details what Zookeeper is or what Kafka is. I'm just going to go and simply install them. So the first thing you have to do is go and start running Zookeeper. And actually this page simply tells you all the commands that you have to run to be able to start running these things. And go to your terminal, copy that command that you saw over there. Let's clear our screen and copy and paste the first command, which is going to be bringing up Zookeeper on port 2181 and going to also expose that port. And Zookeeper is up. After it's up, go and copy the second command, which is going to bring Kafka up. And also it's making a link to Zookeeper so that Kafka instances and Zookeeper instances can talk to each other. So it's that simple. And I'm usually using Kitematic to visualize my local Docker, what's going on within my Docker. So as you can see here, I have a Zookeeper instance running, and also I have a single node Kafka running, and both of them are up and running right now. So this is all you have to do to get Kafka and Zookeeper up and running. If we move on to the next thing that we need to do, so we said we are going to be working with Spring Boot and Spring Kafka. So let's go and create our project. And you know, there's this wonderful website, start.spring.io, which lets you go and pick your dependencies, what you want to do in your Spring Boot project, and it gives you a zip file that you can extract, and all your dependencies and the project setup is done for you. So let's give this a meaningful name for now. I'm going to call it Kafka tutorial. And let's give it a meaningful description. Let's call it Spring Boot Kafka tutorial. I'm selecting Java 11. Packaging is going to be jar, and we need to add Spring Kafka because we are going to be working with Kafka. And I want to bring in Lombok as well. And also let's bring in web. So we need Spring Kafka for talking to Kafka. I'm bringing in Spring Web because I want to open a RESTful endpoint um, to put or to trigger sending messages to Kafka, and Lombok usually comes in handy um, in most of my Java projects, so that's why I added it. So let's generate our zip file and go to where it's downloaded, and let's open a new tab here and go to our projects and go to our personal projects. I have a Spring tutorials folder. Let's create a new folder at this location and call it Kafka tutorial 2. Go inside that guy and let's move this thing into that folder, and come on, and then let's go and extract it. All right, our project is extracted. I'm using IntelliJ as my IDE, and I'm going to now open it in my IntelliJ. So IntelliJ is indexing our project, bringing down our dependencies, and I think all is set up now. Let's look into our project structure. This is a simple and basic Spring Boot application setup. We have our application properties files. I usually prefer working with YAML files instead of properties files. They come more handy, so I'm going to be renaming this properties files. And currently our project is doing nothing because it's just a simple Spring Boot application. If you look into our POM file, we have our Spring Boot starter web to be able to create our RESTful endpoint. Also, we have Spring Kafka and Lombok here. So let's go and create a REST controller, and let's call this Kafka controller. In this REST controller, I'm going to create a single endpoint which simply pushes, which is simply going to push messages to Kafka. So let's call our method name send message, and this is going to get a parameter message. We are going to make this a get endpoint, and let's Let's make the endpoint look like send message as well. And we have a request parameter, this endpoint, and the name of the request parameter is going to be message by default. And let's go and add some logging. And this is something that Lombok comes handy. And for now, let's just go and check our RESTful endpoint is working as expected. So I'm just going to be logging the message. Let's go and start our application. But before we do that, let's do a quick configuration here so we can have our Spring Boot application shown in services tool window. I'm going to add Spring Boot here. Let's remove these. We don't need them, and we usually don't use them. And let's apply and OK. And to be able to use it, I need to also get the services toolbar visible, and our application is here. So let's go and start our application now. Control D is a handy shortcut which starts our application as debug mode. So it's up. The Tomcat started on port 8080. Let's go and make a request to our endpoint now. So I need to make a couple of modifications. It's port 8080. We added a request parameter which is called message, and let's send a test message. So when we make this call, we should see here in our logs that the text message is logged. So let's see. Our request is successful. Let's go back to our logs, and our test message is logged as expected. So our RESTful endpoint is working. So the next thing we have to do is actually add some simple Kafka configuration so that our application knows where Kafka is and can communicate with that. And actually, there are only two properties that we need to add. One of them is this group ID. Let's call our group ID Kafka tutorial. I'm going to talk more about what this consumer group ID is because that's really important. But let's not focus on that right now. And the second configuration parameter is auto offset resets, and we are going to set it to earliest. I'm going to also be talking about this in the future. So now we have our Kafka controller. We made some basic configuration. As I said, this is the basic configuration that you need to have to be able to communicate with Kafka if you have Spring Boot installed. Spring actually gives you a lot of defaults. For example, by default, it looks for Kafka at localhost and on port 1992, and it creates all the required beans and wires them together and does all the configuration for you. So the way you talk to Kafka or send messages to Kafka, let me rephrase that, is to use a Kafka template. And when you are defining a Kafka template, these generic structures, string, you are actually defining the type of the message that you are going to be sent. So in this case, we are going to be just sending string messages. And the first part of this generic entry is about the type of the key. I'm going to also be talking more about these, but for now, let's go and add a constructor, and let's say we want to auto-wire our Kafka template. So Kafka template bean is auto-generated or auto-created for you by Spring Boot. And we are just auto-wiring that bean into our Kafka controller class, so we can start sending messages to Kafka. And let's go and do a quick test with that. So I want to send a message, and Kafka template gives you a lot of different send methods, and each one of these gets different parameters depending on what you are trying to do. You can pick and use one of these, but I'm going to be using the most simple one, which is this third one, which gets only two string parameters. One of them is, the first one is the topic, on which topic you want to send your message, and the second parameter is the data parameter. That's basically the message body, what you want to send. So in this case, let's send our message to a topic called Kafka tutorial, and we are going to be sending the incoming message from our RESTful endpoint. So when I make a request, instead of just logging it, I'm now first sending it to this Kafka tutorial topic over here, and then simply logging the message. Okay, this is the simplest way that you can send a message to Kafka. And okay, we are sending messages, but the second thing, of course, we want to do is listening for these messages. And this is a simple application. So in this case, I'm going to make this application both listen and produce messages. So consume and produce messages. And for now, we don't want to do anything with that message, so we can simply log it. And to differentiate these things from each other, let's call this message coming from Kafka, and let's do this. But this is a simple method, so by itself it's not actually doing anything. We just need to give Spring some hints that this method is going to be a Kafka listener method. And the way to do is to use this Kafka listener annotation. You just annotate a method with this Kafka listener, and then you need to give the name of the tab topic that you want to listen from. In this case, it's going to be the topic that we are actually sending our messages over here, Kafka tutorial topic. And this is all you have to do to simply talk to Kafka. So let's restart our application in debug mode and see if it's working or not. Oh, So we have a lot of exceptions. Let's see. Okay, we have an unknown host exception, and by default, Spring Boot configures the local host 1992 as the Kafka Bootstrap server. But where is this host name coming from? Because we never mentioned this kind of a host name anywhere. So what is this about? So to understand this better, I mean, to be honest, I was expecting for this exception because this is something that I resolved before starting to record this video. So um, I wanted to show you that this happens if you go with the default Confluent Kafka image. And to understand this, let's go and look into our Kafka container that is running in Docker. So if we exec into this container, but let's before going into the container, let's look at the logs of the container first. So when Kafka is booting up, it gives you all this information. What are the properties that it starts with? And one of these properties is this advertised hostname. So basically, this means that when a consumer or a producer Kafka client tries to communicate with Kafka on this localhost 9092 address, how Kafka is going to respond back. So how is it going to introduce itself? How is it going to advertise itself? And by default, if you don't have any additional configuration, Kafka advertises itself as the host name of the server that it's running on. So now if we go into the container and try to check what its host name is, as you can see, the host name of the container, which is automatically assigned by Docker, is 3F521B398781, which is actually the host name that we are getting an exception about. And why this is happening? Because my application is running in the host network, which is actually my Mac. It's running in the Mac's network, but my container, Kafka container, is running in Docker, and it's within the Docker network. So this host name is resolvable within the Docker network, but it's not resolvable in the host network. So my application actually, or the network that my application is running in, have no idea what this host name is or where it lives. So to be able to fix this problem, instead of Kafka advertise the host name of the container, which it does by default, we need to tell Kafka how we want it to advertise itself. And the way to do it, here I'm using Kitematic, by the way. It's really handy when you are trying to do these kind of uh, different configurations for your containers or images. The way to do it is when you are booting up your Kafka instance, to add a new environment variable which is called Kafka advertised hostname, and we want its value to be localhost because it's exposed on localhost, and we want our consumer and producer clients to continue to communicate with Kafka on localhost 1992. We don't want it to use it a container hostname, which is not resolvable within the host network. So let's save this. This is going to cause our container to restart. Our application, our Kafka application is restarting now. And if we go and check that property again, now we are going to see that our advertised host name is localhost. So this is enough to fix our problem. And as I said, this is a simple tutorial video which is going to be showing you how to work with Kafka using Spring Boot and Spring Kafka. There are a lot of details for how to configure a Kafka in a production environment. This is not the correct way to do it. And Kafka has a comprehensive documentation about this. So if you want more details to how to better do it, you can go and check it. But for the purpose of this video, I think this much information is enough for now. Let's go and restart our application. Yep, I think it's up. We see Kafka tutorial partition 0 is assigned to our consumer. Now we can go and try to see if our message producer and consumer is working as expected. And the way to do it is to make this send message request again. I'm sending a test message. Seems to be successful. What I'm expecting actually 2 log messages this time. One is going to be coming from the send message RESTful endpoint, and it's simply going to log the message, which is test message, and then the message is going to be sent to Kafka, and my listen Kafka method over here, which is listening for the same topic that I sent the message to, is also going to log a second message, which is going to this time say message coming from Kafka, and it's going to say test message. So let's go and check our logs if it really happened or not. And if we check our logs, yep, we see the test message first, which is coming from the REST endpoint. And we see the message coming from Kafka test message, log message, which is coming from our listen Kafka method. So let's make another request and see if it works as well. Yeah. So we are connected to Kafka. We are being able to send messages to Kafka and listen for the messages as well. So this concludes the first video of the series. Stay in tune for the upcoming videos for more details. Thank you.